Masechet Baba Batra Daf Yod Bet. We're talking about the rights and responsibility of neighbors, people that live in this that share a courtyard or an alleyway or a city. And we have the first halacha here. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Mevo'ot hamefulashot le'ir acheret ubikshu ha'ir bnei ha'ir lesotman bnei ota ha'ir me'akevin alehen lami ba'e ki leka darka acharina dem'akebi ela filu ki ika darka acharina name me'akebi. Rabbi Yochanan teaches that if you have an alleyway that is open to another city, in other words, not exactly like this picture, this picture is coming up next, but let's say I had a public domain here, and you have an alleyway that's shared by a few people with courtyards. So this is their alleyway. However, the other side of the alleyway opens up to a road, and that road goes to another city, right, some far away. So now the people, they when they want to go to that city, they have to access that road. So they normally go through this alleyway to get to that road. Now the people in this courtyard, they want to close it up. They want to close up that way so that the people won't go in. The people can stop them, right? They can the people from that city can stop them because it says, listen, we have a right to get to the other city. We've been walking in this way for a long time, and therefore we acquired that right. And now the Gemara comments on the Rabbi Yochanan. This is true not only in a case where there is no other path. For sure, if there's no other path, that's the only way to get to the road to that city. For sure they can. But even if there is another road, on the other side, there's another road that they can access to get to that road to the city. Even so, this one is more convenient for the people that are over here, and therefore the people of the city can stop the people of the alleyway from blocking up that exit. Mishum de Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Damar mesar shechaziku barabim asur lekalkelo ked Rav Gidel Damar Rav Gidel Rabim shebareru derech leasman ma shebareru bareru. And why do the people of the city have such a right? After all, isn't it the alleyway of these people's courtyards? Can't they do whatever they want? And the answer is no, they can't do whatever they want. It's the same halacha that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, who said that a path that goes that the people got used to, one is not allowed to mess it up. And also, like Rav Gidel says, that when the public choose a path for itself, then whatever they choose is chosen. In other words, even if I have a private field, my own field, but there's from some time in the past, people have always used this field as a shortcut to get from this place to that place. That's it. I have to leave that shortcut because that's it. They have a chazakah, a presumption for a prior right that they get to use that area, even if it's in a private domain. So all the more so here, where it's a shared domain among these people, but the public already had a right to pass through it, then they cannot take that away. Amar Rav Anan Amar Shemuel Mevuot HaMefulashin L'Reshut HaRabim Bukshu B'nei Mevuot L'Amid Lahem Delatot B'nei Reshut HaRabim Ma'akevin Alehen. Another law in the name of Shemuel, that let's say you have an alleyway, and the alleyway is open on one side, it could be two sides, to the public domain. Let's focus on one side. And now the people that live in these courtyards and share this alleyway, they want to put doors on the front of the alleyway. That way they can close it and have more privacy, and the people from the public domain won't be able to come in. So his halacha is that they can, the public can prevent them from doing so, because sometimes when the public domain is very packed, there's a lot of traffic, people need to go in here and push into here and use the space. So since they've been using this area, but when there's a lot of traffic, so now they're allowed to use it, and the people in the alleyway cannot put doors and stop them. Savur minna hanemile barba amot kedebizera amar Rav Nachman. Tamar bizera amar Rav Nachman arba amot simuchot shut rabim kishut rabim damyan. Now, first, when they heard this halacha, the rabbis thought that what Shemuel means is not the whole alleyway, but only 4 amot, because when the public domain gets very full of traffic, so then people need just a place to stand over here or to put something to rest for a bit, and so they need a little bit private space. But they don't need the whole alleyway, they just need a short space. So maybe they can't put doors right in the front, but if they want to put the doors further back, 4 amot away, then they would be allowed to. That's what we first thought. But then we checked into it, in fact, not so. Velahi hatam le'inyan tum'ah, val hacha zimnin dachki b'nei reshut harabim v'hayli tuba. It's not so. This statement of Rav Nachman is only regarding tum'ah. There's a law regarding safek tum'ah. Let's say, right, I was in a certain place and now I'm not sure there tum'ah there or not. There was something already over there, right? Did I touch it or not? So the halacha is that if one is in a private domain, then we have to be machmir. But in a public domain, we're mekel. And we assume that it was not tumah and the person didn't touch it, because there's always so many things in public, and it would be impossible to live if you had to worry about every possible safek in a public domain. And so, in fact, Rav Nachman only said that regarding the laws of tumah, that just like in a public domain, if you have a safek here, then you are lenient. So too, in the first 4 amot of an alleyway, we consider that also to be like public domain, and safek will be tahor. But further into the alleyway is like a private domain, and that would be tameh. That's what Rav Nachman was talking about. He wasn't talking about our halacha of putting a door. And in fact, putting a door, when the people in the alleyway cannot put a door anywhere, not even further in, because sometimes there's so much traffic, you really can't, there's no room to stand or do anything here, and then people need to push in to the alleyway. And so, since the public uses it on a regular basis, therefore, you cannot take away that right. The Mishnah taught that if 2 people own a field in common and one wants to force the other to split it, then it has to be at least the size that after they split it, that what this person will have enough land to plant 9 kav of grain, and the other also will have enough room to plant 9 kav of grain. That's the minimum amount that's considered useful, viable, that you would want, that you could work that land. However, that was Tana Kama. Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, the 4th generation Tana, says no, half of that amount, 9 half kabin. Now the Gemara comments, they're not arguing in principle, rather they just lived in different places. In the place of Tana Kama, the land was not so great, and so you needed the land amount, the size, to plant 9 kav in order to get produce that would be worth one's effort. Whereas in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, the land was better, and there, for even half the size, you got a yield that was worthwhile. Be'Bavel mai, Amar Rav Yosef, Be'Radu Yoma. How about in Bavel? What's the minimum amount of a size of a field that you'd say this is worth having, and that if each one of the partners gets that amount, then one can force the other to split? And Rav Yosef says, an area that's 1 day of plowing, that when you want to come and plow it, it takes you 1 entire day in order to plow that field, then that's worthwhile working on. If it's smaller than that, then not so, because let's say it only takes a half a day to plow this field, but you have to go hire workers and you have to pay them for the whole day. So it's not worth your while to even bother working on a piece of land that is less than the size that it takes to plow for a whole day. My bed adu yoma. Now we want to explain what exactly this means, because there were 2 times of the year that they would do plowing. They would do plowing in the summer when the land was all dried out and hard, and so they do plow. That plowing took a long time. They would plow again in the winter when they actually put the seeds in, and at that time, since it was already plowed in the summer, the plowing was easier and went faster. So when you say 1 day's worth, which one is it, in the summer or the winter? If you're talking about during the time of planting, meaning in the winter, so then that would be 1 day of planting in the winter. That would be take longer in the summer, but it wouldn't take twice as long. It would be like a day and a half, and so you're still stuck with a problem. Fine, I hired workers for a whole day in the winter to plow it, but that same amount of space will have taken in the summertime a day and a half, and so that's not very good, because I don't want to pay someone for a day and a half, for 2 days, for only a day and a half of work. And if you're talking about the amount of time it takes in the plowing season, meaning in the summer, so one day's worth, well then, when I come to the winter, I'm going to do that much faster. It's only going to take half a day. And again, I'm going to have to pay them for the whole day, even though they're only doing half a day. So one way or another, I'm going to get a fractional day, because it doesn't add up to a whole if both the summer and the winter. We can answer actually both ways. We can say we're talking about a day of plowing during the plowing season, meaning in the summer. Okay, that where it's very hard to plow it. Okay, you have that size. Now, when the winter comes and it's easier to plow, actually the custom is to plow twice. Once before putting the seeds in, and once again after putting the seeds in. So two plowings in the planting season is equal to one plow in the summer season, and therefore both of them take up a full days of work, and therefore it's worth hiring day laborers to work the entire day, both in the summer and in the winter. Or another answer is that we're talking about a full day in the winter season when we are planting, and it's easy to do. And that same size piece of land, we're talking about rocky ground, so that in the summer when we first plowed it, it's because it was so rocky, it took 2 full days to plow it. So 2 full days in the summer because it was very rocky, and then when it comes to winter, it's easier to plow. That would take 1 full day, and those are again both whole numbers, and so that would be worthwhile hiring workers to work that land. Now, Davla, Amar Rav Nachman, Dalu Yoma. The Mishnah mentioned that if we own a cistern together, so one cannot force the other to divide it unless they agree to. And so Rav Nachman says, what would be the minimum amount that a cistern holds that one could force the other to divide it? He says, if it has a volume of water for 1 day of irrigation, that's worthwhile having that size. Smaller than that, you can't even use it for 1 day of irrigation, then that's not worth anything. You can't even call it a cistern. Now, Pardesa Amar Abu Shmuel Bat Shedoshet Kabin. If one has an orchard, the smallest orchard would be enough to plant 3 kav, and then that would be worthwhile to work such a land. Smaller than that, one partner cannot force the other because it's not worthwhile. Tanyan mehachi haomed lechavero menat bekedem ani mochel lecha sumchus omed lo yifchot mishalosha kabin. We have a Batra that supports that opinion, because here the Batra says, if someone says, I'm going to give you a part of a vineyard, but he doesn't say how much of the vineyard, so how much is it? Sumchos says that it's not less than 3 kabin, because 3 kabin is the minimum amount that would be worthwhile maintaining. And so you see, that supports the same idea that we just had. That was Sumchos's opinion. However, Amar Rabbi Yosef, and Elo Ela Dibre Nebiut, Rabbi Yosef argued against Sumchos and says, where'd you get that? These are only words of prophecy. He means in a sarcastic way. If it was really prophecy, then okay, that would be fantastic. But actually not so fantastic, because we don't learn halacha from prophecy. After Moshe Rabbeinu, what's in the Torah, that's it. Nobody could add more halacha based on prophecy. So basically what he's saying is, you have no source, you have no derivation from pasuk, you're not giving an explanation of logical reasoning, right? You just said so. When a person says, I'm giving you a part of a vineyard, you know that that's what he means, that it will be 3 kabin, and it has to be at least 3 kabin. Rabbi says, what's your source? How do you know that? Okay, this is going to prompt a long section about Dibre Nevi'ut. Now, but first, Bebabel Mai, how about in Bavel? What's the minimum size of a vineyard that they said in Bavel would be enough that one partner can force the other to split it? Amar Rava bar Kinsa telat asyata bene teresar gufne ki enchi derafe kabra beyoma. And he said it's 3 rows of 12 vines, which is how much a person can hoe in a day. If after they split it, each person has that much, then one can force the other to split it. אמר רבי אבדימי בדמין חיפה, מיום שאחרי בית המקדש ניתנה נבואה מן הנביאים וניתנה לחכמים. עתו חכמים לאו נביא הוא? הכי כאמר, אף על פי שניתנה מן הנביאים, מן החכמים לא ניתנה. Rabbi Abdimi from Haifa said that from the day that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, the prophecy has been taken away from the prophets and given to the sages. He seems to be talking about the first Beit HaMikdash. In the beginning of the second Beit HaMikdash, we still had a few Nevi'im, but that's pretty much it. That was the end of prophecy. So even though prophecy was taken from the prophets, it was given to Chachamim, to sages, who don't speak as prophets. They don't say, oh, Hashem told me, but rather through their wisdom, through their Torah learning, they're able to express and teach Hashem's will. Now we ask about this formulation. Wait, is a chacham not a navi? It's like taken from the nevi'im and given to sages. But aren't chachamim also sages? In fact, one of the qualifications to be a navi is that one has to be fully wise, be perfect in their intellectual capacity. So what does that mean? He says, we explain. This is what he means. Even though it was taken from Nevi'im, but it was not taken from the sages. Beforehand, it was given to lots of different Nevi'im, and now Nevi'im aren't going to get it anymore if they're only Nevi'im, but Chachamim, they still have prophecy. But again, they're not acting as prophets in the same way that prophecy worked, but rather through their knowledge and wisdom and acquiring of Torah. Amar Amemar, v'chacham adif mi navi. Amemar says, no, not only was it taken from Nevi'im and given to Chachamim, actually a Chacham is better than a Navi. How do we know? Shene'emar v'navi lebab chokhmah, mi nitle b'mi, heve omer katan nitle begadol. It says in Tehillim, a prophet has a heart of wisdom. A prophet has wisdom. So who are you comparing to whom? You always compare the smaller to the greater, right? You say, this computer is so good, it's like the supercomputer at Google, right? So you're going to compare the smaller one to the bigger one. And so to here, if you're saying that a prophet has a heart like a wise person, that means a wise person is even greater. In what way is a wise person greater than a Navi? Well, I mean, if you look back in the time of in Sefer Melachim, in the time of Nevi'im, not everything was perfect. Most of the time, people didn't even hardly listen to the Nevi'im. There were false prophets, and it was not easy for many people to distinguish who's telling the truth, who's saying a falsehood. A Navi comes, and he comes, and he's a great inspiration, but then he dies, and then what happens? We see in Sefer Shoftim. Whereas Chachamim, because they have continuity and their authority is based on their meritocracy, because right they have knowledge and they know how to interpret the Torah, and they teach students, and they can show here's the reason why I'm teaching this. This is my source. This is my explanation, and so this is more long-lasting and a more stable system than a one-off prophet being very inspirational, but then having false prophets and then not having continuity. So actually, Chokhmah, having knowledge of Torah and being able to share that and spread it, and having a legal system of halakha that's based on rabbis and not a prophet, that if it was just based on prophecy, each prophet could come and say, Hashem told me a different halakha, Hashem told me something else. So this is very, very wise of the wise rabbis to say that we can't base halakha on prophecy, not even on a bat kol from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but rather it has to have a system, and this is the system of the knowledge of the sages. Amar Abaye Teda, Tamar Gabra Rabba Milita, Umit Amira Mishime de Gabra Rabba Achrina Kevate. And now we want to prove that wisdom has an element of prophecy in it. How do you see that? A great man, sometimes he says a chidush, he says halakha, and then you hear from someone else the very same thing. Like great minds think alike, right? Sometimes you hear an idea from two completely different people, right? Like invention of calculus by two people at the same time. How could it happen that both of them invented or thought of the same great idea? It must be that they're both able to tap in to a prophetic, inspirational idea that's out there, even though they're coming up with it through their wisdom. They have to be smart people to do that. But you see, the fact that they two people do it at the same time, that proves that it's prophecy. Rava says, no, you don't need the explanation of prophecy. Maybe both of those people are under the same constellation. You can think of this in an astrological way, like they're both destined to come up to say this at the same time, or more likely here, it means they have the same character traits because they're born under the same stars, or you could understand it says, it's lucky, it's a coincidence that they both came up with the same thing at the same time. A lot of times the world is kind of ready for a certain idea because all the groundwork is there, and the possibilities, and then, okay, someone's going to come up with this idea a little earlier, a little later, but around this time. So maybe these two people, it's not because they're tapping into some kind of inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh prophecy, but maybe because they are living at the same time, and they have similar characteristics and ways of thinking, and that's why they came up with the same idea. So Rava says, I have a better proof. Sometimes a great man will say something, and then he didn't know that Rabbi Akiva, the great Tana, said the same thing. Now, you're not going to say that they're born under the same constellation. We're talking about people that would be born at total in a future generation. But that future person didn't know what Rabbi Akiva said, right? Sometimes person, you're reading a pasuk and you say, it's a difficult pasuk, and you come up with an answer. And then what do you know? You didn't look at Ibn Ezra before, but what do you know? Ibn Ezra says that. Rashbam says that. So if a person says something that ends up being the same as what Rabbi Akiva said, well, how could it be? It can't be. It wouldn't say he has the level of Rabbi Akiva. It must be that he was able to tap into an inspirational, prophetic idea out there. Amar Rav Asher umay kushya dilma leha milita bar mazalehu. But Rav Asher disagrees with that. He says maybe for this particular thing, they are in the same constellation, or they're thinking along the same wavelength, or he got lucky and understood that also, right? Pretty much anybody, you can find some pasuk that you read sometime and you say, I think it means this. And then, what do you know? Ibn Ezra says that. It's not like that difficult to think about what a great person said in the past. The difference is Ibn Ezra wrote a commentary on the whole Chumash. And, I come up with like one thing about one pasuk or two pasukim. Okay, so it doesn't mean that this person is as great as Rabbi Akiva just because he had an idea that Rabbi Akiva also thought of, right? Anybody might be on the same wavelength for one particular idea that he really thought about a lot, and so that could also be just part of their character trait or a coincidence, not because of prophecy. Ela amar Rav Asher teda. Amar Gavra Rabba Milita. Umit amira halacha leMoshe miSinai kevate. Oh, Rav Asher says, I have a better proof. Sometimes a great man says halacha. This is it, and then he finds out later. You know what? There's an oral tradition going back to Moshe at Sinai. So now he intuited. If someone is able to intuit what Hashem was told, what Moshe was told at Har Sinai, that surely was prophecy, and that was the highest level of prophecy, the kind of prophecy that can legislate law. And if I'm thinking about something and I say, I think the halacha should be that, and turns out I didn't know that, but now there's a tradition that's halacha Moshe Sinai. That means I intuited a prophetic message. That means, right, that chacham that intuited that is able to tap into prophecy. Right, so isn't this a good proof that a chacham has prophecy too? It's not necessarily, could be like a blind man who finds a skylight, even though he can't see light, and a lot of times he's going to have false starts and just follow the wall and bump into something. Once in a while, by chance, he happens to see a skylight. Even a broken clock is correct twice a day. So maybe it was just luck. Right? Whenever you say any halacha, so you're going to say either allowed or not allowed. Okay, 50-50 chance you'll say what the halacha leMoshe Sinai is. So that's not a proof that Chachamim have prophecy. Velav ta'am yahiv. Wait a second. But the sage, he's not speaking blindly, just saying random things. Asur, mutar. Oh, look, he happened to be right one time. No, he gives a reason. He's giving an explanation. So the fact that he's not just guessing, but he has an educated guess, more than a guess. He has an educated reason. That he says, well, here's the principles, here's the pisukim, here are the sources, I can figure this out, and he comes up with an answer. So that is, in fact, shows that Chacham, through the normal learning of Torah, right, through his understanding and wisdom, comparing, deriving one thing from the other, using his own reason and sense of what is right, can come up reliably with what the halacha leMoshe Sinai is, and because he can prove his point, that shows that in fact a chacham can tap into the insight of prophecy. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ביום שחרב בית המקדש ניטלה נבואה מן הנביאים וניתנה לשוטים ולתינוקות. Okay, before we celebrate and say, oh look, see, we have chachamim, so they're the modern day prophets. Rabbi Yochanan says they're not the only ones. In fact, from the time that Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Nevuah was taken away from the prophets and given to imbeciles and children. Lashotimaihi, where do we see that it was given to crazy people? Kiha demor bar Rav Asher dehavakae beristeka demechoza shema'e lahu shote deka'amar resh betibta demalich bemata machseya tibyomi chatim. We see a story of Mor bar Rav Asher, that one time he was in the street in Mechoza where he lived, and a crazy person was standing in the middle of Times Square. He was saying the head of the head of the yeshiva that will be in Mata Marseya, he signs his name Tav Yomeh. So he's saying this a prophetic word about the future, that the next Rosh Yeshiva is going to have a name, is going to go by the name Tav Yomeh. Amar man chatim Tav Yomeh berabanan ana. So Mor bar Rav Asher, he was the son of Rav Asher, the famous 6th generation Babylonian Amorah. Mor might not be his name. That just means the master. It's a title. Okay, so he starts thinking to himself. He hears this crazy person say this, and he says, well, who signs his name Tav Yomeh among the rabbis? It's got to be someone that's among the rabbis, not going to pick a random person to be the Rosh Yeshiva. He says, I do. That's my personal name. His personal name was Tav Yomeh. In Hebrew, it would be Yom Tov. That's his name. So I can derive from this that my time has come. That's it. I am ready to be. They're going to appoint me to be Rosh Yeshiva. Okay, he's all excited. And even though it was a crazy person standing on the corner that said it, he said this crazy person, sometimes crazy people, they can tap into things because they're not constrained by a reason or what people will think about them. Sometimes that their craziness actually is coming from a place that they can understand things and see things that nobody else can. So he said, this guy, he must know what he's talking about. So, kam ata, he goes to Mata Marseya to take his position. Adata imnu rabanan otbe l'rab acha midifti beresha. By the time he came, the rabbis voted and they appointed Rav Acha of Difti to be the Rosh Yeshiva. So it turns out this crazy guy is totally wrong. I mean, maybe this crazy guy saw Mor bar Rav Asher. He knows his name is Tav Yomeh, and he said this thing. Who knows? Okay, but Mor bar Rav Asher didn't let it go. Kevan de sham'i da'ata shedur zugad rabanan legabe damluche be akebe. So now the sages heard that Mor bar Rav Asher arrived, and they said, "Oh, he's a great sage. We should consult with him, give him respect." And so they sent a pair of sages to go speak to him and says, listen, we appointed Rav Acha from Difti, we voted, and we want to get your approval, right? This is a good person. And Mor bar Rav Asher, he keeps them with him. He doesn't let the messengers go. He says, come, have a cup of coffee, have another cup of coffee, have cake. He wouldn't let them go. He's talking to them, learning with them. Hadar shedur zugad rabanan achrina. So the people in the court, they're like, oh, those guys didn't come back. So they sent another pair to go find where the first pair went to. Akebe gabe, and Mor bar Rav Asher keeps them also in his home. Ad malu be'asara, they sent 5 pairs of messengers, all 10 people altogether. And now he has all these 10 people in his home or wherever he was. Kevan de malu be'asara petachu utena uderash. Afish en potrim bechala pachot me'asara. Once he had 10, that's a quorum. That's a minyan. And then Mor bar Rav Asher got up and he made an official derasha. Right, he taught Tanah, he taught the oral traditions, and he explained those oral traditions, because when you have a kala, that's an official gathering for Torah learning that would be done in 2 months of the year, Elul and Adar, when lots of people would come and would and study together. So to do a kala, often there would be many people, but it has to be at least 10. So the point is that he got 10 people there, sages, because they were messengers from the court, and now he gives an official public lecture. And by doing that, he places himself as the Rosh Yeshiva of the city of Mata Marseya. So this was literally a self-fulfilling prophecy, because he actually made it happen, even though the sages were already voted for someone else. In any case, the words of the crazy person ended up coming true one way or another. Kare Rav Acha me'anafshe kol ha'mere'in lo bimhera metibin lo v'kol ha'metibin lo bimhera mere'in lo. Rav Acha from Difti, who must have known that he was a finalist as a candidate. So he applied to himself the rabbinic saying, anyone who is treated badly is not going to quickly be treated well, and anyone who's treated well is not going to be quickly treated badly. In other words, this is the situation for the time being, and probably for a long time to come. You could once say he is appointed, and I was kicked out, then that's going to be the situation, and he accepts that this is the way it's going to be. Okay, this story, does it really prove that crazy people have prophecy? I think the rabbis are telling the story in an ironic way, because it's not exactly that he prophesied. In fact, what he prophesied was not going to come true unless Rav Asher hadn't done this intervention. Okay, but now we get to Tinokot Maihi. Where do we see that children sometimes, right, Mepi Oladim v'Yonakim, right, they say things that turn out coming true. Kiha de Rabat Rav Chista, Hava yatba bichnafe de Abu, Havu yatbe kamer Rava v'Rami bar Hama. One time Rav Chista, he had a daughter, and his daughter was sitting on her father's lap. And Rav Chista had his two students in front there, Rava and Rami bar Chama. And Rav Chista is joking around. Amala, man minayhu ba'et. This is which one of these students would you like to marry? Amrale tarvayhu. So she's a sharp kid, and she says, I want to marry both of them. Amar Rava ve'ana Batra. Rava thinks quickly, I want to be second. Why? Obviously, she can't be married to both of them at the same time. That means she's going to be married to one, and that guy could be divorced, but more likely die, and then she'll marry the other one. So she says, I want to be second because I don't want to die early. And that's in fact what happened. So this is a proof that sometimes children, things that they say a funny thing, but it turns out to be a prophetic truth. Now this story also is not really an absolute proof, because there's a lot of human agency here. Rav Chista, these would often be arranged marriages, and often the daughter of a great sage would be married off to a top student, right? This happened, it happens even in modern times. And so Rav Chista would have married her off to, right, one or the other. And okay, the fact that one died early and then she ended up marrying both, it's true. Maybe you couldn't have predicted that, but we don't know exactly what age, and maybe he was even a little bit older, but eventually died, and Rava did end up marrying her. Okay, so that's the proof that for imbeciles and for children. I think these stories are both kind of like a little bit ironic, and really takes us back to the original statement of Rabbi Abdimi Dimin Chefa that said, from the time that the Mikdash was destroyed, that's it. Prophecy is no longer with prophets, but really with Chachamim. And then we saw Chachamim are even greater than prophets. I think this is a very, very important statement to say, don't feel so bad like, oh, we don't have access to Hashem, that we don't know what He wants from us, that He has no voice in the world. Don't worry about it. We have the Torah, and we have experts who can derive lessons from the Torah and apply them in the sages of each generation. And that system has proven to have continuity and success for thousands of years. So I think that's the main point of this of this series of Agadot. And it all came from one rabbi saying, how do you know that? What is that? Nevuah? Meaning, even if you knew it from Nevuah, after Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't derive halacha from Nevuah. And these statements are really foundational to understand the way the rabbis thought of Chokhmah, learning of Torah, and understanding the words of prophecy. That's how one achieves prophecy today. Rav Avdimi said something else. Amar Avdimi Dimin Haifa. Kodem she'achal adam v'ishteh, yesh lo sheteh lebabot. Lachar she'ochel v'shoteh, en lo ela leb echad shenemar. Ish nabub yelabeb. Uchtib nebub luchot, mutargeminan chalil luchin. Before a person eats and drinks, when he's still hungry, he is of two hearts, meaning he's all distressed and unsettled. Because you can't try to talk to someone and have them concentrate when they're starving. They're like, I keep thinking about food. I can't really understand what you're saying. And so they're not settled. But once he eats and drinks and now he's content, then he can concentrate and he is of one heart. How do we know that? Because the pasuk in the Yov says, a hollow man is two-hearted. Yeh labeb, double language, two bets. Why is he hollow? Because he's hungry. Now how do you know that navuv means hollow? Because it says regarding the building of the Mishkan, specifically the building of the Mizbeach was made of planks of wood, and so you had planks of wood all around, and the pasuk says nebub luchot, that it's hollow inside. The Mizbeach that they would have to carry it around. There's a mizbeach that they sacrifice the animals on. It wasn't one single whole block of wood that would have been very heavy, but rather panels. It was empty inside. So, and the Targum there says halil luchin, hollow with planks, and that's how you know it means hollow. And the same thing as an empty person, meaning a hungry person is of two hearts, he's distracted. Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yehoshua, haragil b'yayin afilu libo atum kibtula yayin mefakecho shenemar betirosh yinobeb betulot. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, says, anyone who drinks wine on some regular basis, even if his heart, meaning his mind, is closed like a betula, and he can't think outside the box, he can't imagine anything because that his mind is closed. If he has a little bit of wine, then it opens up his imagination, and now he can think of things. As the pasuk says in Zechariah, a new wine opens betulot, and so too this is a mashal referring to a person's mind. Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua, pishita chelik bechor vechelik pashut yavinan le achad misra. Yavam mai. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, says, I know the halacha regarding a bechor. Let's say there's two brothers. One's the firstborn, one's not. The one that's not is called pashut, a regular brother. Now, if the father dies, the bechor is going to get a double portion, and the other brother only one. So let's say there are 3 parcels of land, and let's say, like this picture here, they're all in a row, 1, 2, 3. Now the bechor says, listen, can I have 2 of them contiguous? Because two pieces of land that are contiguous are easier to work, more valuable than if it was not. So if you give the bechor A and C and give the other brother B, that's not really good for the bechor. So for sure, everybody agrees that a bechor, because he gets a double portion from the father, then he has a right to say, I want the 2 together, either A and B or B and C, but he definitely gets the middle one. Okay, that everyone agrees with. The question is, will that apply to a case of yibum as well? Let's say there were 3 brothers, one of them was married, and he died without children. And then one of the other brothers, let's say no one is a bechor, so we don't have to worry about that double portion. And so one of the other brothers does yibum. So now he is the yavam. The halacha is that the yavam inherits his brother's property. Now, if the father dies, then that means the yavam will actually get 2 portions. One, he's inheriting from the father, and he also gets the portion that the father would inherit to the deceased brother, but now, since he's deceased, the yavam gets that portion also. So, when the father dies and the yavam gets 2 portions, can we apply the same law? And since he's getting 2 portions, he has a right to say, I want the 2 portions together, contiguous. Or do we say, not so, because it's different. A bechor inherits both of his plots from the father. So he inherits them together. It makes sense that they should be together. But the yavam, he inherits these 2 separately. One from the father, one from the brother. So therefore, these are 2 separate things. And then the other brother might have a reason to say, oh, I want the one in the middle. You have the ones on the outside. So is that a valid claim or not? That's his question. Amar Abaye, Ma'itama bechor karyera chamana. Abaye says the law for a yavam is the same as the law for a bechor. Why? Because the pasuk refers to a yavam as a bechor. The pasuk says, "Vaya bechor asher teled." Yakum Hashem achiv hamet, the firstborn that will be born. Now, Peshat reading of the pasuk is talking about the future child from the yavam and yavama will uphold the name of the deceased, even though it's the biological child of the living brother. We consider him the legal child of the deceased, and that child will inherit. That was the original Peshat halacha. However, the Midrash says that HaBechor refers not to the child that will be born, but rather to the Yavam himself, and teaches that the mitzvah is that the oldest of the brothers should do Yibum, although any of them can do Yibum if he doesn't do it. And since the Yavam is referred to as a Bechor, therefore he has the same laws as a Bechor, and for all matters, just like a Bechor, not only gets 2, but he can ask for 2 contiguous, so to a Yavam gets 2 plots, and he can have them be next to each other. Rava Amar Kera Vayaha Bechor Havayato Kebechor Ve'en Chalukato Kebechor. Rava disagrees. He's saying, although the pasuk does say that the firstborn, and it does refer to the Yavam, that just means that he is like the Bechor in that he gets a double portion. But the distribution is not like the firstborn in all its details, and he is not entitled to get double contiguous because his double portion is coming from two different sources. Now you had a story about someone, a son, who bought land that was right on the border of his father. Nashir literally means his wife, so it actually could be his father-in-law. Could be a case of a father-in-law who has no sons, and then the daughters are going to inherit. Okay, but let's just keep it simple, that he has land next to his father's property. Kika palgu amar lehu peligu li amisrai. That the father dies eventually. And now there's a couple of sons, and so this son says, listen, can I have the land that's next to the land that I already own? Give me on that side, so that way I could have one big contiguous field. Rabba says, in this case, that brother has a valid claim, and we compel the other brother who doesn't own land next to his father's field to not conduct himself like a character of Sodom. The character of Sodom is to take something from other people, even though it doesn't you don't lose anything, just to torture other people, just to make their life hard. So this should be the opposite. Don't be like Sodom. Rather, be generous. This is a case of the brother who doesn't own land next to it. What's the difference to him if he takes the parcel on the right or the parcel on the left? So let him take the one that's not contiguous with the brother who owns land, and that way he can benefit without the other brother having any loss. That's Rabba's opinion. However, Matkif la Rav Yosef amri le ache ma'alinan le iluya ki nechse debe bar marion v'chata Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says that the brother who does not own land next to his father's property can say, I want to assess this field. We assess this field as a particularly valuable, like the property of the house of Bar Mirion. They were known to have the fields that were very valuable. So the other brother can say, listen, these two fields are not the same, and the one that happens to be next to your field is more valuable, and therefore, if you want that one, you have to pay me the difference. Let's make an assessment. You can't just take it. If it's a better field, then I get to get half of its value. And that is the halacha. So it's not midat Sodom, because he has a right to get his share of a better field. Tere ad ata, tere nigre. Amar Rabba, kegon ze kofin al midat Sodom. Let's say there's two pieces of land next to two water channels. And so one of them says, I want the one that is next to mine, next to land that I already own. So Rabba says, in this case, we force him not to act like midat Sodom. This would be the case like this. Over here, you have Plot A was already owned by one of the brothers before the father died. And then the father owns these two plots to be in this whole area. They're all one when the father has it. The father dies, and now they're going to split it. So the brother that owns plot A says, listen, can I have plot B? They're both along mine is along the water. Yours is also along the water. So that's the same. So what's the difference to you if you get plot B or C? So let me have plot B, so it's next to A, and you take C, and then everything is fair. So isn't that fair? And Rabbah says yes, he has a right to do that. Otherwise, that would be midat Sodom. Matkif la Rav Yosef zimnin tahai midvil v'hai la midvil v'ilchata ke Rav Yosef. But Rav Yosef objects. He says sometimes one water channel will dry up and the other not. And so the other brother who doesn't have land, he can say, well, if I take this one and it dries up, then I'm going to be out. So he can say, I'd rather split it up this way, like this. That way, you can take plot B, that's still next to your land over here, but I want this one plot C. That way, it's connected to both channels, so that if one dries up, then I can bring water from the other one, and vice versa. So he has a right to say, you can't get this. I mean, it's a nicer shape like this. This one's a little L shape, right? But he can say, I want it to be split like this, even though it's not as good for you, because I have a right to have access to both channels, and halacha is like Rav Yosef again. Tarte achad nigra. Amad Rav Yosef kegon ze kofin al midat sedom. Let's say we have two parcels of land next to one channel. In this case, Rav Yosef, who before he said that the brother who doesn't have land has a right to his claim, here Rav Yosef agrees that the brother who already owns land has the better claim. And this is when there's only one channel. So plot A is already owned by one of the brothers. And then the father owned this whole area, B and C. When he dies, Rav Yosef agrees in this case that the one who owns plot A gets plot B also. And the other one gets plot C because they're all along the same river. If this river dries up, then it's going to affect all of them. It doesn't makes no difference to the other brother whether he gets B or C. And therefore he has a good claim. Matkif la Abaye, Maseh Amar, Ba'ina de'apish ariseh. But Abaye rejects Rav Yosef, and he says, no, the brother who doesn't own land can say, oh, it's better for me to be in the middle, because then you will, if I'm in the middle, you'll have to hire sharecroppers for A and for C. And you'll have to hire more sharecroppers because working two lands that are separate requires more workers than one that's contiguous. And because you're going to have a lot more workers and you're surrounding me, you will give me protection. And look at that, I get free protection from you on both sides with lots and lots of sharecroppers, so it benefits me actually to be in the middle. So he has a right to say that according to Abaye. However, Al-Khatak Rav Yosef, Apush Elav Miletahi, Halacha still follows Rav Yosef, because increasing sharecroppers is not a legitimate claim. Right? In the other cases, you had a legitimate claim that you want to have a right to access both parcels of land, or if one parcel of land was better than the other. But here, this is an indirect thing that you want more protection from the other sharecroppers at the brother. That's not affecting your land itself. And therefore, halacha follows Rav Yosef in all cases, but in the last case, Rav Yosef says that the brother who owns land can get his contiguous land. Chad gisa nagra v'chad gisa nahara pagin la bekarna zo. Lastly, if there's a water channel on one side over here and a river on the other side. Now, a river is better than a water channel, has more water. So how are you going to divide this land so that they have equal access to both the river and to both the channel? It wouldn't be fair to just split it down the middle in one diagonal, and then one person gets all the river and one person gets all the channel, right? Or what are you going to do it this way? Then one person gets all the river and half the channel, other person gets nothing. So how are you going to do it? And so the answer is that we do it in a diagonal like this, like a pizza pie, in 8 different parts. And that way, by doing that, so Reuven has half the river and Shimon has half the river, and also the channel. Reuven has access to half the channel and Shimon to half the channel, and then you just continue that all the way around, and they'll have to pass through the middle in order to get to their other sides, but this would be the way to make sure that the division of the inheritance is equal and fair. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.